at some point we need to talk about women and relationships as well. I believe that we have been feminized, and I understand that maybe for a woman it sounds like a good result, and maybe in the short term, if you can, control a man, it might seem like the best result. But then, of course, in the long run, that's the worst result. It's a bit like us getting these, non-dangerous men that are dangerous. It's like if you control your man, you're going to get ultimately someone that's very frustrated, that's probably going to be more dangerous for you. So I'm curious of your thoughts on some of that, and I'd love to dive into this stuff as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of threads to pull on there. I think, a lot of men feel like modern society is kind of like the myth of Sisyphus, right? Where you're just pushing the boulder up the hill and it's rolling back and crushing you, and pushing the boulder up the hill and it's rolling back on you and crushing you. And that used to be that there was this not prize at the top, but there was this dream, this like you were pushing the boulder up the hill for a purpose. You were contributing to something bigger. Your country was better off for it. Maybe your wife and your family was better off for it. But all of those things have kind of come under, not under attack. I don't want to make it sound like that, but I think that all of those things have become outcomes that men see as problematic, and because what happens is they look at modern dating as an example, and they're told like, well, work really hard because you want to get a good relationship and you get married and have kids. But a lot of guys look at things like dating apps and they're like, well, but I'm not getting any attention on dating apps. It's the top 5 to 10% of guys on dating apps that are getting attention from 95% of women. And the bottom 50% of men, bottom 60% of men on something like Tinder, they're not getting anything. They're not getting swipes. They're not getting conversations. And so there's kind of this big move towards the, whatever we want to call it, the red pill notion that young men, no matter how hard they work, they're not going to be able to get the job. They're not going to be able to get the career. They're not going to be able to get the woman that they want or would love to be with. And so why bother even try? And then I think you have largely a social place, like a social conversation that is very opposing views, right? You have the sort of like hyper masculine, just fucking, man up, pick up your bootstraps, like be a man, stop being such a pussy. You sort of yelling at them, make the money, get the Bugatti, fuck the whole system, escape the matrix. And for a lot of men, for some men that works, they're like, yeah, this is it. This is what I've needed. I'm going to get my shit together. For a lot of men, they're like, that doesn't feel real or authentic to me at all. That feels kind of one-dimensional. I don't feel like it has substance. I don't feel like it's going to help me solve my problems. But then on the other side, it's okay. Don't do anything, just be more vulnerable, talk about your feelings and your emotions more, and everything will be fine. But then they get in a relationship when they do that, and she runs off, with the bartender.
Yeah.
And so I think for a lot of guys, there is this paradox in many areas where they're kind of stuck. And they're like, well, who do I turn to? What should I do? What is the right thing? And I think for me, I've voiced, like, if I was a young man in today's culture, if I was a 20-year-old in today's culture, I probably would be wrapped up in the Andrew Tates of the world that are saying, just make money, get in great shape, have as many women around you as humanly possible, and don't worry about the rest of it. Because that's very appealing to the young male psyche that just wants to be successful. So I don't think I've necessarily answered with a solution, but I'm really trying to lay out and map the problem for people. Because as the saying goes, unless you understand the problem fully, you'll never come to the solution. And to understand the solution is to understand the problem. And so I really want to contextualize what the landscape is like for young men, because they are struggling. They really are.
Yeah, I can feel that, and I can see how this one size fits all isn't going to work for everybody. I get that. The Tates and even the Peñas and maybe even the Petersons aren't going to work for everybody, although he has a more nuanced message and a little bit of a different message. But yeah, I could see that. It's just not going to resonate with everybody. And they're going to need different ways of maybe trying to get them on this path of improvement. You know, my boys are 7 and 8, and so I'm literally thinking about this and trying to create men right now. And you know, sometimes I have conversations with them, and while I'm having it, I think, wow, if anybody heard this and this was like on, you know, the New York Times front page, they would be shocked. You know, and we read. Jocko's actually got a series of kids books called The Way of the Warrior Kid, and we read these books, and they're really good, I think. And we read them on repeat. And you know, it talks about this young boy. It marks like a wimpy kid, and then his Uncle Jake comes for the summer. Very interesting. You might like it because it's not his dad; it's the Uncle Jake, and it's a role model. And he learns about how to overcome a lot of his phobias and fears. And then there's different books for new adventures into the shadow as well. And we read these, and so my boys get to see this stuff, and we talk about this stuff, and I start having conversations like, about being a leader, and what does it mean to lead or lead your life, or what are the kind of things that as a man, like what do we do and what are we going to have to do? And they're still young, but I'm still having these conversations, and I'm probably being a little more honest and direct than a lot of parents, and especially maybe a lot of men that grew up in the last 10 years, because I'm a little older and I see it.
How do you get out of a rat race? How do you create wealth not only for yourself, but also for the generations to come after?
I am absolutely amazed with the quality of companies that we're getting exposure to.
We go on to Zoom calls with the innovators and the folks who are building new applications in metaverse, blockchain, artificial intelligence, decentralized finance.
What's going on, everybody? Thumbs up if you can see me.
We are focusing on early stage investment.
And the quality of people that we're getting exposure to, whether it be Dan Tapiero with 1RT, Jason Ma from Open, Yatsu from Animoca.
It's been a phenomenal experience thus far. It has far exceeded my expectations.
We are focusing on cutting edge technologies.
I view it now as the best investment I've ever made. The upside I view is unlimited.
And as a retail investor, I would never get this exposure anywhere else outside of Investment Club.
See you in the Investment Club.